The speakers' biographies were to be posted, but I'm going to run through who's going to be speaking this evening very quickly. We have first Rebecca Mills, member of Herb's blended family, former wife, mother of their daughters Sarah and Lydia, a retired national park manager. She worked consistently with Herb, and after he died, to assure his novel was edited and published. Peter Cole is a professor of history at Western Illinois University. He's the author and editor of multiple books on maritime labor history, including the award-winning Dockworker Power, Race and Activism in Durban and the San Francisco Bay Area. Manuel de Paz was 13 years old in 1980, living in the El Salvadoran campo with his family, who suffered terror and murder from the dictatorship's death squads. Later, he emigrated to the United States and joined the East Bay Sanctuary Covenant, which he represents this evening. Lydia Mills is one of Herb's 3 children and mother of 3. She teaches music and recently published her book for music teachers, La Magia de Codale. John Burke is one of Herb's 3 children and father of 3, and a counselor and coach at the Stevens School in Pebble Beach. He directs schools, girls water polo at the school, is the founder and club director of MBU Water Polo Foundation, and has coached his teams to win major championships. Fernando Torres is a Chilean writer, musician, and author of Walks Through Memories of Oblivion, stories of resistance, prison, and exile from his experience as a political prisoner in the Pinochet regime. A good friend of Herb, he pays tribute to him in Presente in his review just published in El Tecolate. Deanne Burke is a member of Herb's.
The date on that letter.
Everyone should be muted. Deanne Burke is a member of Herb's blended family, mother of their son John, and has known Herb since their activist days in 1989 on the UC Berkeley campus. She's an artist and activist, taught elementary school for 54 years, worked for the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, and represented her American Federation of Teachers local at the Alameda County Central Labor Council. Harvey Schwartz is a historian with a 55-year connection to the International Longshore Warehouse Union, who has published 3 books on the union. In 2000, he was voted honorary ILWU staff member by the International Convention meeting in Portland, Oregon, and still functions as a curator of the ILWU Oral History Collection. And finally, my friend Mike Miller is Herb's longtime close friend and fellow strategist in labor and community organizing and grassroots political action. He has written widely on race, community, and labor organizing and democratic practice, and edited the book Herb Mills, A Tribute. So with no further ado, and again with my welcome, I'm going to turn this over to Rebecca Mills. Rebecca, you're on.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on one second, Rebecca.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Peter to mute everybody. Todo el mundo.
Already?
Go for it.
Okay. I'm so thankful that you are all here. I recognize a lot of people, some that were part of Herb's getting his PhD, Carl Greenwich, whose face isn't showing, but he's on here, who was a longtime friend of Herb in the Union. And it was his brother, Nick, who found the military cargo and notified Herb when this all happened. And others, Patricia Linden and Mike Miller, who helped all along with the other major editors of the book. It's such an exhilarating moment for us. Writing and publishing his novel Presente was Herb's dream, and all our family knew how he worked on it and wanted it published. He died knowing I promised him I'd get it done, and his friend Peter Cole promised him too. It took 5 more years, family support, and lots of help to make it happen, and thanks to Hardball Press, it's published. Hardball Press states on its home webpage, when you're trying to change the world, it's not enough to quote facts and statistics. Minds are changed and supporters are mobilized when their emotions are engaged. Hardball Press is dedicated to mentoring working class writers, putting their stories into print so the world can see their faces, hear their voices, and join them in their struggles, end quote. This is exactly what Herb wanted for his novel. Publisher Tim Sherd recognized it when he read the sample chapter that we sent him. And Herb thought more people would read a novel than his many essays and articles. So thank you, Tim. And thank you to editors Peter Cole, Stephanie Fay, and Matthew Talon. Though Herb graduated Phi Beta Kappa and earned a PhD in political science, this book is no dispassionate analysis of on the one hand, on the other. It's about a fight. Fighting for working people here and in other countries, fighting against very powerful adversaries, reaching out and gaining allies in religious communities, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, people of conscience who joined in the fight. We all know that we're living through a critical moment in the history of our world. It's a yeasty time for Herb's book to hit the streets and get into readers' hands. It's a great read with a lot of heart, twists and turns, laugh out loud humor, organizing lessons, a taste of romance, and both painful and uplifting truths. As Herb's last line reads, the struggle continues. So before Peter reads to you from the book, I'd like you to take a look at 3 statements of praise from outstanding writers, Adam Hochschild, Mike Miller, and Troy Duster.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. We're going to next go to Peter Cole, our friend Peter Cole, one of my favorite writers. Peter, you're on.
Thank you so much for that kind word, Bill. And it's a pleasure to be here with everyone across the country tonight. Thank you for coming and spending an hour with us. I'm so happy that this book is out. I do thank Becky and Tim in particular for all the work that they've done over the last few years. So my job is simple. This book is called Presente, a Dockworker Story. You can get a copy at Hardball Press's website or other places. So many of us know this, but in case you were unaware, the word presente is like the English word present, right? It means that you're present literally, but it means much more than that, right? And so in many Latin American countries where struggles for social justice have occurred, when someone is killed or many people are killed, when they're celebrated, when they're remembered, often they are named, and then the final word would be presente. Right. And so one of the characters in this book, which is based, of course, on real events, was the Archbishop in El Salvador, Archbishop Romero, and we would say Archbishop Romero Presente. Right? And that is an important part of what's happening here in this story. So I'm just going to read to you a little bit of this book to give you a taste, right? From Herb Mills, A Dockworker Story, Chapter 1. Wednesday, December 3rd, 1980. I rolled into the dock parking lot at my usual time, 10 to 6, hoping for a quiet day. I had met up with an old pal visiting Frisco the night before and was still feeling the effects. It was strange for me to be hungover. Come a morning, I always hit the road feeling sharp, but today I barely managed to make it out of the house with the decks awash. Getting out of my trusty old 73 Dodge, I was immediately met by a half a dozen guys who stuck around after the night shift, waiting to catch me as soon as I got in. I knew right away I wasn't going to get my quiet day. Still, I had no idea just how unquiet things were about to become. Although everybody talked at once, I caught the gist of the problem as we moved through the slackening rain toward my office. They had been asked to lash some cargo on a shipment fresh in from Hong Kong aboard the Astral Tide, and conditions just weren't safe. Railings less than 30 inches high on narrow platforms and a 12-foot clearing. Any worker fell, he'd be straight in the drink. They had tried to explain the situation to the terminal boss, a guy with a sour puss and an even more sour breath named Michael McSweeney, but he just started the usual jive. So they put down their tools. Now they wanted to make sure that the Dayside gang would also refuse to do the unsafe work. We had some good fun scheming what to do next. As a union officer for the San Francisco Bay Local 10 of the ILWU, the International Longshoremen's and Warehousemen's Union, my most and least favorite part of the job were the same thing, wrestling with the folks on the other side, the bosses who didn't give a goddamn about us dock workers or our safety. I felt incredible whenever I got a victory for the workers, but the endless fight was wearing, depressing even. We decided if Boss McSweeney failed to come up with a safe method to unload the boxes, they'd call Local 10 to try and reach me. But when they did that, they'd discover I was tied up seeing a lawyer on behalf of an injured worker. That'd buy them a couple hours. Then, once McSweeney did reach me, I'd school him on every damn thing that was wrong with that worksite. We all felt pretty snappy with our plan. The day continued with a run of routine matters, a couple of guys complaining about fines for missing a membership meeting, a brother asking about his dues while he was off hurt, an old pensioner wanting to know what labor would do now that Reagan had been elected. I snorted, now that's a damn good question. Another guy came into my office to request clearance to travel. A lot of the dockers go working in other West Coast ports to clear their heads. As I signed the guy's release papers, I found myself getting jealous of his travel plans. I was ready to go too. 2 terms as a union officer fighting the bosses on the waterfront had worn me out. When I heard the intercom buzzing for what felt like the 80th time that day, I suspected it was McSweeney wanting to jive me about his lousy boxes just before the shift begins. My response ready to go, I answered, "Yeah? Steve, Nick Rowan's calling you from Pier 50B. 5 minutes to start time, he's on his schedule." Nick phoned so often he never turned up to work without a pocket full of dimes for the payphone. Still, Nick was okay. Too many calls to the union from a steward was better than no calls. I hit the transfer button. "Hey, old bud, what's doing?" "Listen, Steve, I'm here at 50B, okay?" I could hear the tension in Nick's voice. This was no petty gripe. "Yeah? What would you say to a shipment of weapons to El Salvador?" Yep, another quiet day on the docks. End of chapter 1. You'll have to read the book to read the rest.
Peter, thank you very, very much. We're now going to be listening to Manuel de Paz. You're on. Is Manuel with us? Okay, apparently not. Okay, Fernando Torres. This is not good. If this keeps happening, I'm going to have to do a soft shoe.
Fernando is here. I see
Fenya was
Fernando's here. Yeah.
Fenya?
Yeah,
Are you
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Peña. Actually, my name is Fernando Torres. I am from Chile, South America. And I have a quiet political past. I was a political prisoner under Pinochet. I was also a member of the resistance in Chile. And you don't imagine how or what effect had in us, in our struggle, the action of Mr. Irv Mills. He started something that we thought it was impossible. You know, when we started the resistance, we believed that the whole world was against us. Of course, it was not the whole world. It was only the United States against us. And Irv Mills' actions were very, very simple. I mean, the only thing that you require is to have a minimum of humanity, decency to do what Irv did. And it was known all over the world immediately. We were so happy that we knew the struggle of the port workers. We knew that there were brave people, working class people, and we knew that something like that could happen anytime, and did happen, and it changed the solidarity movement all over the world, because it told us that anything is possible. You know, we had, like the farm workers, we had a boycott to the grapes, Chile grapes. Then the name of the boycott was nothing from and nothing by Pinochet, and nothing for Pinochet. So I am a reporter, I'm a journalist, I'm a writer, and I wrote something for a newspaper, a little newspaper in San Francisco. It's called El Tecolote, and it's a group of Chicanos, Latinos that put out this newspaper, and also they put out concert, cultural events, and all sorts of things. So I wrote a little piece, and I'm going to read some of it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but as Peter said, you have to buy the book. You have to buy the newspaper too. Okay. Presente. The book is not a political statement nor an academic paper. The book is an entertaining part of history, written with masterful simplicity by someone who was required by history and did not avoid it. To be a protagonist of events with local and global repercussions. I was so fortunate to meet Irv and his family in the Bay Area. We were introduced by his daughter, Lydia, during a solidarity event in Berkeley, La Peña Culture Hub. We both supported the anti-dictatorial struggle of Latin America. He listened with a profound attention to my stories in Pinochet prisons and as a militia against the military dictatorship. He had a great respect for all people who stood up and risked their life for the right thing. As Irv once said, solidarity was part of the culture of the union. They refused to discharge coffee beans from the apartheid South Africa, and government purchased grape during Cesar Chavez boycott to support the farm workers. Mills play a leading role in one of the longest strikes of the longshoremen workers in the 70s or early 70s, and demanding greater safety for workers unloading toxic materials. The union also stopped ships carrying military cargo to the brutal Salvadorian military junta. My grandfather was a longshoreman in the north part of Chile, and once he was working with heavy load, and one big package fallen to his leg, so he was handicapped for the rest of his life. He was lame for the rest of his life. So I put that into perspective, and I realized how important is the work of the union to protect the safety of the workers.
Fernando, we're gonna have to wrap up.
Okay, okay. Many of us in South America thought that the people of the United States were all fervent admirers and supporters of an aggressive colonialist policies of their government. But ERB actions also made it clear that there are many supportive people who are capable of risking everything in protest and standing up to the injustice committed by US imperialism around the globe. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And Manuel de Paz is on board. Manuel, you're on.
Manuel?
Sorry. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to apologize because I was having some problems in getting in. Fortunately, I was able to. First of all, I want to thank Rebecca and team for inviting me to talk about my own experience back in the 1980s. I am not a good spoken person. I'm a very simple guy, but I just want to start saying that presenting this book, Presente, is a great way to remember her meals. And I want to thank you for that. As you know, may know in my biology that they wrote, my name is Manuel de Paz. I am from El Salvador. I immigrated to the United States back in 1990 to escape political persecution and great repression in El Salvador. I was very young. I was 22 when I came to the United States. And so why I came, it was because my family and the village where I belong to a village called El Rosario Perico, belongs to a town called Tenancingo that is part of Xochitoto, like close to Xochitoto, maybe it's a very touristic place now. And so we were very affected because after Bishop Romero, before Bishop Romero was killed, my three brothers were murdered by the National Guard and the people who are civil, but they have weapons. So they came to my house that was March 21st of 1980. And I was asleep, I think it was around 6 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I don't remember. And I heard the shootings, and at the shootings, I heard my mom said, as kids, run away, the army is here. And she ran away, and she was wounded on her left leg. So I wake up, I never, we were pure souls, I was 13 years old. I didn't know what's going on, but something told me, like surviving the spirit, that something was really evil, and something told me run away. And I started running away on zigzag because even my spirit told me to run on zigzag because the shootings were going on. And then I left my house, and in the countryside you have these big lots, and there was a huge mango tree, and I stepped by the mango tree and I saw the army came, and I left. So I didn't return to my house until around 10 o'clock in the morning, and my three brothers were killed. My oldest brother, Jose Apolinario, and my second brother, Tito de Jesus, and Carmen. Carmen was 15 years old. She just had her birthday. She was cut, on her head, and she was raped by 25 paramilitaries. And my second brother was, his head was cut in little pieces, and my second brother was, they cut his head. And I remember my mom was crying and saying, that this is what the tongue does, because that the U.S. a long time ago, they developed that's what they call the paramilitaries in Latin America in order to have so that they will denounce people who are working in the church, who are catechists, and they accuse them of being communist. So that day, so my mom was very strong. She only said, I offer my sons to God, and I asked for forgiveness. And so other 6 persons were killed, people who never, I mean, we didn't know what weapons were. We don't know. I didn't know about what a military was. I don't know anything about violence. But from that day, our lives changed completely. So because we live in the mountain, and other towns were going in revolutions, and many of these towns were defeated by paramilitaries, and they were coming into our place because it was a very strategic place. And so my mom and my dad and my youngest brother Max, they came to San Salvador, and they found this place called El Hospital La Divina Providencia, which is very famous. You know why? Because that is where Bishop Romero was killed. And I had an uncle who had a cancer, because this place is for people who had cancer. And my uncle was in recuperation there, and they came and they refugee there for, until the war ended. So I joined them later. But because of that, we were never reunified as a family again. My oldest brother, the one who survived, is Tulio Serrano, who has Crece here, an organization for Central Americans. He spent most of his life in the mountains, and he decided to immigrate at the end of before the offensive of the FMLN in the 1989. So he came here. And then I came in 1990, and then we brought my youngest brother, Maximiliano. But since then, we were never together. My dad passed on 1992. I was 2 years old already here. And then my mom passed away in 2016. This year, I went to El Salvador, and fortunately, my 2 other brothers who are here, we get there and we celebrate our birthday with the 4 brothers who survived. We were together and hug after 40 years. So because of that, because of the killing of my brothers, because of all that we went through, and because the last FMLN offensive back in 1899, if you remember, when they killed the 6 Jesuits from de la Universidad Centroamericana, my mother asked me to come to the United States, and I decided to come. I tried 3 times cross Mexico without money. I was riding the cargo train in La Bestia. If you have heard, you can reach it on YouTube if you don't know what it is. But it's basically jumping from wagon to wagon. At the same time, I was able to make it, and I came to LA. My uncle received me. He passed away already. And then my brother Tulio came to Oakland, and he had some connections, and he asked me to come to Oakland. And that's how I was able to meet East Bay Sanctuary Covenant. I went to East Bay Sanctuary Covenant, and I applied for that time for TPS. If you remember, the early TPS that El Salvador had, and Nicaragua and Guatemala was under Bush father. And I applied for TPS. Under TPS later, 13 years later, I applied for my green card and became citizen in 2008.
Sorry, I'm about to ask you to wrap it up.
Yes. So I just want to wrap it up. I'm working now at East Bay Sanctuary Covenant since 2006 as a community organizing and advocacy program. I am working on policy change, working on different campaigns. We are trying to pass HR 1511, which will provide path to citizenship to 8.5 million people if we are able to pass it. And we are working with the state and working on educating the community on workers' rights and stop the hate crime. And I'm being so blessed that after being so through a lot, I've been able, to give back to the community. And I just wanna wrap up by saying that I never understood what was happening in El Salvador. until I became mature. It's still hard for me to understand, you know, but the war in El Salvador was against campesinos, it was against women, it was against the poor people and against children. And I will close with this. It was so much evil in this war that children that had my age had to fight, had to become part of the guerrillas in order to fight back and defend their life and defend their families. And that's what we call them, terrorists, you know. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's my pleasure to share some part of my story, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Next, we'll be joined by Harvey Schwartz. Harvey, you're on.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Very flattered to be invited. I'm a long-term friend of Herb Mills. I used to meet with Herb every now and then, speak with him often. I would actually like to congratulate the people who brought this about. Vicki Mills, who kept her word to Herb, and Pete Cole for his extensive editing. I know he did a lot of editing because I saw the manuscript years ago myself. There'd be no book without Becky and without Pete, I believe. Also like to congratulate the editors, Mark Tellen and Stephanie Fay, for their contribution, and also Mark Nelson, and publisher Tim Sherrod at Hardwell Press. Appreciate all that they've done. Together they made Herb's dream come true, a dream of many years, and provided us with a readable and informative novel, the novel that Herb envisioned. As I note, the original manuscript needed work. It needed to have things cut. It needed to have the story flow and hang together. And I think this was done by this team. And they deserve a lot of credit. Results, you know, people have talked about. One thing, the short chapters, I think, were a good idea. That was an interesting innovation. I think that's helpful for workers because they can read little bits at a time, like riding a bus or whatever. The editors, I believe, preserve Herb's voice and authenticity, and I talked to him enough over the years to kind of recognize it. It's definitely in the book, and it's been preserved with great success. I read the book closely myself, and I wrote a review of it for the ILWU Dispatcher. That's the international newspaper. I hope it will be released soon. Well, Herb felt that the story of the Census waterfront and the ILWU might be the best way to present this history or this information in novel form. He felt novel form might be the best way to do it. You can debate that all night, one way or the other, but be that as it may, Presente successfully communicates the Union's colorful history and its culture, its militancy, the comradeship of its members, and its devotion to social justice on a social scale. So I think in that regard, Herb was successful. The final product's a novel that moves well, it entertains, it holds up throughout, and it provides Union lessons as it goes along. We'll all benefit in various ways by reading it. And congratulations again to everybody who made this happen. Thanks for giving me the moment, folks.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
We're joined by Mike Miller. Mike, you're on.
Thank you, Bill. I met Herb in 1960. We shared an apartment on Cedar Street, and then later a small house on I forgot. Anyway, we were very close, and
Milvia.
that's it, Milvia. We were very close, and I was working during this period as the field secretary of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the Bay Area, and then later doing community organizing locally. And through that work, I had good relationships with many people in the religious community.
Again.
And
But yeah, send me what he.
And these relationships included Tom Ambrosi. Tom was a former Jesuit who had laicized and was the executive director of the Archdiocesan Social Justice Commission. So when the El Salvador shipment of arms came up, Herb and I were talking almost every day about how to respond, and was very difficult because this is the Reagan presidency, which would have no hesitation about cracking a whip on ILWU, which is very different from the Jimmy Carter administration, which was in place during the Chile work. So in our conversation, we came up with the idea that the religious community should be mobilized as an ally in this struggle. We weren't going to do the full page ad like we'd done with Chile in the San Francisco Chronicle. We were going to enlist a more active participation by the religious community. And Tom Ambrogi was a key person in making that happen. So I don't remember the mechanics of how the introduction first worked, but Herb and Tom got together, had a wonderful conversation, and Ambrogi enthusiastically embarked on a course of mobilizing both locally and nationally religious community. And in that effort, he got letters, telegrams, all kinds of communication from around the country indicating religious community support for what ILWU was doing. So when the question of what the employer was going to do came up, the Pacific Maritime Association treated this as an opportunity really to crack down on the union. And they were kind of relishing the fact that this opportunity arose, and they knew that Ronald Reagan would be an ally. And so in a meeting, this is told in the book, this story, but in a meeting, Herb brought a box in with him to the PMA meeting, and they said something about, oh, we're not going to let the union get away with this or whatever. And he said, well, you don't only have the union to contend with, you have all these religious people. And he put this box and dumped the letters on the table and passed them around and said, you go ahead, read all these letters, and then tell me you're going to jump on the union. Well, there was like a hushed silence in Herb's recounting of this story. And then as a kind of little final touch, he said, and one of these letters is from the Carmelites, and they don't even talk. So they were a silent community, religious community that had indicated their support for what ILWU was doing. I want to say one other aspect of Herb. He managed to be a fierce internal critic of Harry Bridges, and yet retain a respectful relationship between the two of them. It's a quite extraordinary thing. He had a little card with Bridges as a young man on a ship, and it was signed to my friend Harry. And Herb was a protagonist of the M&M agreement, the mechanization and modernization agreement that led to the elimination of thousands of longshoring jobs. Herb was not anti-modernization. He just had a carefully thought out strategy for incorporating modernization into the work while preserving as many jobs as was possible. Herb was always interested in how do you put unusual pieces together in a strategy, and he thought he had one, but the Bridges administration resisted and agreed to what is now known as the M&M agreement. So Herb and I spend endless time
Okay,
together.
I should wrap up, Mike. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Herb and I spent many an hour together. I miss him as every day. And thanks for putting this together, you guys.
Thank you, Mike. We're now going to hear from John Burke.
Hi, everybody. Super happy to be here today. Wonderful to see so many friends and family and people that loved my dad. I have a couple of things I was going to share on. I wanted to start by thanking Becky for all of her incredible effort and organization and oversight and vision and persistence in getting Presente and this very large project to the finish line. I know there's a lot of other people that have been intimately involved in that process as well. And, you know, on behalf of myself and my sisters, and I'm sure everybody else that's on this call, you know, thank you so much for that. It's remarkable and means the world to us. I actually thought this would never happen, to be perfectly honest. I grew up with papers all over my bedroom in a small apartment on Hillegas Avenue in Berkeley. Paper clips and papers and staplers and binders and hundreds, if not thousands, of manila folders that carried various pieces of Presente and other writings of my dad, you know, throughout his travels. But it occurred to me the other day when I looked in my closet and I saw 5 binders of Presente that were all working editions, that I don't really need those binders anymore, although I will keep them. But it's certainly nice to have a more synthesized version for the world to enjoy. So I also grew up in an apartment with telegrams that were mounted on the wall. And I can remember as a youngster, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years of age, those telegrams beginning to pique my curiosity. And I believe that those were telegrams from people like Ron Dellums and other congressional California lawmakers, as well as telegrams and writings from various religious organizations, many of them also applauding the resistance to load military cargo to El Salvador. We grew up with newspaper articles mounted on the walls, such as the 1934 general strike in San Francisco, where Bloody Thursday took place. I still have that article or that newspaper framed and saved. And as Mike mentioned, there was also a large mounting of Harry Bridges. And actually, Mike, what it said, to be specific, I remember this. It says, "To my friend Herb Mills, them were the days." And it's a picture of Harry Bridges barefoot on the stern, or yes, of a 1920s like Australian cargo sailing vessel, right? And then Herb subsequently made small copies of that larger print. But I want to make sure I'm efficient with my time. My dad was a writer. He was a lover of all forms of transportation, specifically boats and trains. And my dad was a dear friend to many. As a writer, he would write at all hours of the day. Sometimes I would awaken at 3 or 4 or 5 a.m., just feet away from his back. And I would, before coming fully awake, I could hear him typing. And if I listened really carefully, I could hear him inhaling his cigarette. And to this day, although most people have a very negative feeling of cigarette smoke, ironically, when you grow up in a house with cigarette smoke and it's your dad, and you remember that moment when you see him and you feel safe, and yeah, maybe you smell a little cigarette smoke at 6 a.m. Even when I smell cigarette smoke today, it actually brings me to that moment laying in bed and feeling safe with him writing. He used a lot of dashes in his writing. Any of you that have read any of his original work will know that it was nearly impossible to actually read it. And particularly for somebody at a young age, maybe in my teenage years or my 20s, reading his writing was actually really difficult because he loved to use dashes. He spent years and years on a typewriter, eventually reluctantly transferring over to a monstrous IBM word processor that I think he used for the better part of another 10 or 15 years. As I mentioned, scissors, tape, paper clips, binders, manila folders, and multiple trips to the copier, the various copier places in Berkeley where they knew him by first name, sometimes making multiple trips a day, was part of his retirement. And even going to his UC Berkeley office on Bowditch. Many of you may not even have known that he had this office, but he had an office at the Institute for the Study of Social Change, probably up until like 1984, 1985. And I think they've torn those buildings down now, maybe even. But I'm also convinced we only used to go to that office to get supplies. I don't think he actually used the office for the purposes of any UC work. Don't tell anybody that. He was a lover of transportation. He loved boats. Boats were his life. And when he wasn't working on them physically, he was building them. Models and models were full. Thank you. Okay, my son's keeping me on track here. We'll be all right. I'll go fast. Thank you. But he loved to build models. He loved everything about boats. He owned a boat for many years. Many of you may not know he was also a merchant marine. He sailed iron warships in the Great Lakes when he was in his 20s. We would go to the marina for hours on end just to watch boats come in and out. When I was very young, I would actually go to the waterfront with him, and I would sit in large Caterpillar bulldozers and I don't even know what, machines that were on the waterfront, at the age of maybe 5 or 6, and I could watch him longshoring as I sat in those large construction trucks. He loved ferry boats. We traveled ferry boats extensively through Alaska and all the way out to Dutch Harbor. And we rented boats literally everywhere we went. He loved to go out the gate, as he called it, to catch fish on party boats. And he was a huge fisherman. He loved trains as well. He also loved classical music and art. And I'm going to end by saying that he was a very, very good friend to many. In a lot of ways, he taught me about what it means to be a friend to others. And a lot of his friends, particularly the longshoremen from the Pacific Northwest, had actually already passed away when he died in 2018. And these were longshoremen that were also activists. Men like Ted Whitey Kelm, Dick Mork, Sean Maloney, who was the president of Local 19 in Seattle for many years. And I still remember Sean. I was out to dinner with Sean and some of the Seattle longshoremen when I was really young. And my dad said, "Sean, show John your gunshot wounds." And so Sean, who was probably about 75 or 80 or something at the time, lifts up his shirt. And he had 4 holes in his chest. Sean was mowed down by machine gun fire in the 1934 strike as a trucker in Minneapolis, where 4 truck drivers were actually killed that day. And Sean and 2 of his friends were trapped in an alley and were attacked with machine gun fire. And as Mike mentioned, Sean Maloney in particular and my dad battled Harry specifically about the mechanization and modernization agreement of the early 1960s. Other friends of my dad, all of whom have passed: Al Valenzuela, Jake Arnatoff, who was an amazing artist and also a longshoreman in Seattle, and also Dallas DeLay. And another dear friend who is on this call, Carl Granich. And I just want to make sure that I give credit to a lot of those men that were friends of my dad's that influenced me when I was very young. So it's a celebration. Again, never thought this day would come. Thank you for everything that everybody's done to get us to this finish line, and for me to be able to pass this experience and ultimately Herb's book on to my kids and the rest of the youngsters that are coming through our family is one of the great joys I'll have in my life. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Deanne Burke. Deanne.
Maybe she needs to be unmuted.
Yes, thank you. I'll start again. Yes, this is a celebration and a culmination of Herb's long time wish to have his book published, and I celebrate with every one of you today. I met Herb in 1959 when we were both activists on the UC Berkeley campus. Some years later, he became a member as well as an officer in the ILWU. He identified with the membership, and when the time came to negotiate a new contract, he strategized to get the best possible coverage for the pension and welfare and safety package. Herb frequently talked about the contract and what it represented to the women and men and their families, the medical, dental, retirement, and safety at the workplace. He was an activist from his early years, as well as a dedicated writer, political scientist, historian, and a follower of current events locally, statewide, nationally, and worldwide. In the late 70s, Herb belonged to a group of longshore writers who met and discussed their writing. Amongst the writers were Jean Verona and George Benet, in addition to others. In 1978, a small publication titled Waterfront Writers was published with essays, drawings, and poetry. And here's a copy of it. It's not for sale. It's a great historic piece now. One of Herb's essays about the Union is titled The Community in Battle. In the essay, he wrote about job action. He felt it was the most direct, immediate, and vibrant democratic form of collective expression and experience of community. His novel is a representation of job action by developing understanding and support from the leadership and membership to refuse to load a pending shipment of armaments scheduled for El Salvador, while simultaneously developing and involving the support of the religious community in San Francisco. Herb's organizational and strategical skills are evident in the unfolding of the story. Through his main character, Steve Morrow, he presents us with a suspenseful series of events based on his own experience in the late 70s and early 80s. Wherever Herb went, he wore his Dockworker's cap and an ILWU membership pin, the hook, on his shirt. Oh, he was recognized by people he met or by friends and family as a very proud member of the Union, and let that be known publicly as well as verbally, sometimes with colorful descriptive language, and sometimes expletives to indicate how much he cared about being a Union member. As Herb stated in Presente, the struggle continues. I thanked him before and I thank him now for his legacy of lifetime dedication and commitment to the struggle. And to Becky, who followed through with his wishes to have Presente published. Thank you. And thanks to everybody who came today.
Thank you very much. And our final speaker will be Lydia Mills.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much. It's really such an honor to hear everyone and to see all these wonderful friends of our dads. And I know, John, your words were just beautiful in honoring so many of these friends. And for me, I feel like I'm amongst uncles and aunts who have helped raise the three of us, and then by default help raise our children as well. So thank you again for all being here. So amazing, because my brother and I did not communicate about what we were going to both say. But when I sat down to write about my dad, the first image that came into my mind was him sitting at his typewriter and me hearing the typewriter from the other room. And the one thing you missed, John, was the cup of coffee. Our dad drank coffee from sun up or darkness all the way through the night. I don't know how, but he drank coffee all day long. And so you always smelled the smell of coffee in our house. And yeah, up until he quit smoking cold turkey, which he did do, up until then, he always had a cigarette when he was writing. And like John said, he went through from the typewriter to the word processor and finally to a computer. And not only did he use all these staplers and scissors and notepads, but these were like gifts to us on Christmas Day. Like, here's an extra notepad, Lydia, you might need this, and folders and folders. And I just want to share with you all that I still have. Oh, I have to get rid of my foggy background here. Oops, sorry. How do I do this? Okay, well, my son will have to help me. Can you get that? So I still have this folder here that I literally just used today, which says Presente, pages to open and those to close. I still use all these folders. So it's really amazing. His legacy continues in all of our closets as well. Anyway, my dad had this incredible motivation to write, to create, to rewrite, and to share his knowledge and experience in so many ways as he got older. He participated in the History Channel documentary on longshoremen and the containers. He created a website and uploaded many, many of his articles. And he donated priceless longshoreman articles such as logbooks, hats, and many tools to the Smithsonian Museum and to the San Francisco Exploratorium. My dad, even up through the last few years of his life, kept up all this creative and generative spark, looking for ways to give away his stories to interested people. This particular book, Presente, is a book which we kids, our high school and college friends and extended family members knew as the Great American Novel. That's how my dad called it. He was a romantic in this way, and he knew that his experience on the docks with his brothers and sisters at the ILWU could be compared to the characters in a John Steinbeck book or in a Woody Guthrie song. He was a true believer in the laborer, in the American who works his and her way throughout life, providing for their families, making friends, and creating community, and doing a damn well job. As many of us know, the publishing of this book was my dad's dream, and we've all talked about it tonight. His dream was to go beyond the book and to have it someday be a movie. So who knows, maybe we'll do that as well someday. But here we are with a huge part of his dream fulfilled. He wanted to share his story with all of you, with the great American public and beyond. I want to deeply thank my mom for leading this incredible project to its completion, and of course to all the members who helped create this. And I would like to thank my dad, who in his own way connected me to the Latin American community through his political work with Chile and El Salvador. I'd like to honor both Fernando Torres and Orlando Sanchez, two dear friends of mine who have been here online today, both of whom suffered through terrible injustices in Chile and El Salvador. I am grateful to know you both and grateful for the upbringing that all my parents, my mom, my dad, Deanne, Robert, and Dave gave to me in learning about freedom and justice and our responsibility to create a better world. Thank you, Dad. And as Dad would say, thank God for the union. I'd like to also just end by expressing a little bit about what presente, that word, means beyond what Peter talked about in the beginning. I talked to Fernando this afternoon about it because in my experience, yes, it's a word that's used to honor those who have passed on before us, particularly those who have been murdered or martyred in terrible injustices. And Fenya said to me, it's also a way of saying that their spirit lives on in us. So I'd like, if it's possible, I know there's going to be some times for comments and questions, but if we could just take one moment and everybody unmute yourself. And I will say that with us, we have Presente, Herb Mills, and if everybody could say Presente. So if you go ahead and mute yourself, Herb Mills, Presente.
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 Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of the speakers. Realistically, we actually don't have time for questions and comments. And so, but what I want to do is I want to turn this back to Rebecca and Peter for any final comments that either or both of you might have as we bring this in for a landing.
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, thank you so much for everyone who came. It's lovely to see all these people who knew Herb longer and probably better than I did. I got to know him only in the final 10 years of his life. But it's been a privilege to sort of like help bring his novel to light. And as someone posted in the comments, what might Herb think about the current war? I don't know what he might think about this current war, but I appreciate that dock workers have used the same sorts of tactics to refuse to support war, to refuse to support fascism, to refuse to support militarism, to refuse to support white supremacy, to refuse to support colonialism, and that Herb didn't create these tactics. He was part of a tradition, right? He continued the tradition, and the tradition lives on beyond him, right? Because actually in recent years, members of the ILWU have used the same sorts of tactics to express political opinions, because working people also have the right to sort of insert themselves into global politics rather than letting our so-called leaders do that. And so I think that Herb would be very interested in what's going on right now. I know that he was a man of peace, and I know that he would have been proud of workers who stood up for their rights, including to insert themselves into conversations that they're supposedly not supposed to be a part of. I'll turn it over to Becky, who deserves the last word, maybe.
I just want to thank everybody. The speeches did go on. I loved every single one. I was very moved by Manuel de Paz and Venya Torres and all the family members and all of you. Really, thank you so much. And I think Herb would be very, very proud of everything that was said today. Conversation, but I just want to thank everybody for being here. So many old friends and wonderful talks. There were painful messages here today and also very uplifting ones. And the struggle goes on.
I want to thank everybody for attending this, for the presentations that were given, very much given from the heart. I want to give a special thanks to Rebecca and Peter and to Tim Sheard, not only Herb's publisher, but my publisher, and a great editor as well. And so I want to thank everyone for attending and bid everyone a good and safe evening. Take care.